Appreciate it. So now we're going to move to a little bit closer to home, just across the border in Alberta. We're going to have a couple speakers. We're going to reverse the order from what you had on your agenda. And first I'm going to ask Dan Ohler to speak. I was just mentioning it, and I didn't realize it was on the slide till I asked you. When Dan agreed to come over and he was sort of mentioning, and somehow I got his company name, which I just love, but thinking outside the barn. I thought, what a great name. I got to meet this guy. So again, Dan was one of the ones that sort of, Paul had mentioned to me, I'll introduce a bit, and he said, well, he's really busy. I don't think he'll get him. So I was very happy when Dan actually picked up the phone when I rang him and said, look, I really need to get somebody over here from an opportunity development cooperative. Paul's going to come and sort of get the big picture, but I really need a board member. So he said, yeah, I'll come. So Dan is actually the founding member and the chairman of the very first Opportunity Development Cooperative in Alberta, Sangoula Opportunity Development Cooperative, which we'll talk about. Very passionate spokesman for the area, and just really well spoken. We'll see later on tonight to another video that was done by the Alberta government that Dan is in. But you've got a little bit of a bio when you signed up. But what we'll do is turn over to Dan. And again, thanks so much for coming, Dan, and I sure appreciate it.
So we're here to talk about mobilizing rural capital right in your community. That's kind of what it's like. A bit shaky and jittery and scary, but it can be a heck of a lot of fun as well. So here are some facts. Small rural communities are struggling. Costco, Canadian Tire, Walmart, they're leading to retail leakage. So businesses close down. Youth are migrating to the bigger centers where there's a little more excitement, a little more activity. Aging infrastructure starting to fail. Aging people starting to fail. It's kind of a sense of apathy. The old gray mare, she ain't what she used to be. Lack of accountability, it's somebody else's fault. Now, so here's some other facts. You've got amazing highways and transportation systems, great healthcare and education. Look at this place. Some of the prettiest country on this planet. There's amazing, kind, respectful, helpful, caring people in your community. Tons of potential, safe food, clean, fresh air and water. All we need to do, and then there's buckets and buckets and buckets of local capital that is looking for a good place to do some good work in your community. All we need to do is tap into that and make sure it does get put to good work. Now the CDIP models that these guys talked about is a really great opportunity. What Paul and I are going to share with you, what's going on in Alberta, the Opportunity Development Co-op model, is another great opportunity. Your venture capital idea is a great idea. No one of them is the right way. They're all good ways. It's just about you deciding which is the best for you. So I'm going to share some stories about how it has worked for us. Kind of from the community perspective, from the ground roots. Just to see what it's like, and maybe to help you to understand how it can work for you as well. Can you flip the slide here? If you really understand what this slide says, if you get what those pictures mean, get a sense for the feeling and hear what this quote says. If you really get what that slide says, we wouldn't have to have this get together here today. But we're here anyway. Hasn't it been great so far? What do you think? Give a big hand to these guys. So how do we make that happen? Well, starting and creating an opportunity development co-op or any business is, can you have the next slide? It's really 98% mundane and 2% magic. Now the 98%, that's the articles of incorporation and the bylaws and the applications for membership and subscription for shares and bylaws and Securities Commission rules and Canada Revenue Agency rules and government policies and meeting structure and all that stuff. That's really mundane. It's not easy. But structures and processes that are laid out and we just need to find ways to fit into it and to use your capital to invest in the community. Now, the 2% is not really magic, but it is the part that's the most fluid, the most dynamic, the most challenging, the most exciting, the most mysterious. The 2% is about people. It's about people's morals and values and beliefs and their thinking, speaking, and behavioral habits, which includes their investing habits. That's the piece that we need to change. And this 2% is the stuff that is responsible for feelings of belonging, caring, happiness, contentment, fulfillment, safety, love. That's the stuff that creates real community. I'm going to share a story about how this can work. Now, way back in the 50s and 60s, can I have the next slide? Way back in the 50s and 60s, a guy by the name of Richard Beckard did a lot of work in organizational change, and he came up with this formula that works really well in organizations, but it works really well in helping you to move forward and make some really great change in your community. What it says is that the product of dissatisfaction, vision, and first steps must be greater than the ambient resistance to change. As a society, we resist change. I mean, we will whine and complain about the suckiness of what's going on in our community rather than get our duffs off our chairs and do something. It's weird, but it's what happens. Now, the dissatisfaction piece. Now, I don't mean this isn't just, well, I'm not happy with the way this is going. No. This has to be some real deep hurt where it hurts emotionally, socially, spiritually, financially, where it hurts people in their pocketbook. Now, a crisis can be a really good way to increase this dissatisfaction. Now, I'm not saying you want to start a crisis in your community, but keep your eyes open for something that just takes people off. And maybe you can leverage that to increase this dissatisfaction. The vision, a few people in your community, 3 or 4 or 5 of you, need to have this really big, powerful, compelling vision of where you want your community to go, what you want it to look like, to sound like, to feel like. That vision has to be really powerful to keep people moving forward. And then the first steps. Now, the vision could be too big and too complex for most people to really get. But everyone in your community can do one little first step. You know, to ask somebody to arrange a meeting space. To ask somebody else to make a few phone calls to get people there. To ask somebody to research some particular thing. Everybody can handle those one little first steps. Now, you get a combination and a bunch of those first steps, and if you've got the vision that you're moving towards, and there's a level of dissatisfaction, something's going to happen. Probably something good. Now, because this is a mathematical formula, and if you remember back from about grade 4, if any one of those 3 on the left side of the greater than sign are 0, diddly squat's going to happen in your community. That's why local coffee shop talk rarely leads to much action, because there's lots of dissatisfaction, but no vision and no first steps, so nothing happens. So I'm going to share a story about how this formula has worked for us in my little home community called Sangudo, and maybe it'll give you an idea of what you could do in your community as well. Can I have the next slide? So Sangudo, it's a little tiny community about an hour west and a little bit north of Edmonton. It's right on Highway 43 that goes on up to White Court and up to Peace River, and there's a beautiful entranceway, and it's right on in a great geographical location, right on the bend of the Pembina River. But when you get into it, it's your typical dumpy little town. Really, there's not much to write home to mother about. But great people in this community. Now, it used to be that Sangudo was a bubbling, thriving place, man. There were 2 farm equipment dealerships and 2 car dealerships and a hotel and a dance hall and a pharmacy and 2 clothing stores, 2 grocery stores. It was a humming place. Grain elevators. Well, over the years, the grain elevators have gone and businesses have closed down, and there was and still is kind of an attitude from some people of, oh, well, I guess this is just progress, it's the way it's going to be. As they jump in their big four-wheel drive truck and spend $75 on gas and 2 hours of time to drive to Walmart to save 20 cents on the basic necessities of life. You know, the really important things like pop and chips. Well, we had a crisis. Back in 2005, Northern Gateway School Division threatened to close our high school. In a small community, that's like, oftentimes that's the last nail in the coffin. We weren't going to let that happen to us. Some community meetings were called and people came out in droves to figure out what we could do to keep our community alive and to keep our school open. The most important thing that happened out of that is that there were a few leaders that emerged that started talking to each other and looking for ways to do something. They started looking around for any programs, training, anything. Well, it was kind of like a perfect storm that happened for us in St. Gudo. We had the crisis, so the dissatisfaction was high. Right at that point, we learned about a contest that was by the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association, and they were choosing 9 communities across Alberta to participate in something called the Active, Creative, Engaged Communities Program, or ACE. And we were chosen as one of these communities. And through that program, we received a bunch of leadership training and some coaching and some consulting and a little bit of financial help to create a really big, powerful vision for our community and to learn about some of these first steps. So with this leadership training, then the idea was then to do some kind of a project in our community. What happened for us? Next slide, please. Next, click it again, please. On one day in 2009, over 200 volunteers came out on one day to build a new playground, a skate park, a beach volleyball court, horseshoe pits, a bunch of other cleanup and fix-up in our sports grounds and in our little hamlet. Absolutely amazing. We got together, we played together, we worked together, we ate together, we celebrated, right from little wee tiny kids to senior citizens that were walking around on canes. Everybody just got together. It was so much fun. It's still talked about today. And I can honestly say that we wouldn't be where we are in St. Gudo if it hadn't been for that program and the leadership training that we received from that. Now, unfortunately, that program's gone. Their funding ended. However, through what we learned and through some of the work that I've been doing with Paul, you know, there's some of those lessons and the training we're able to replicate and help other communities with. So this did nothing. It was really great for recreation, but it did nothing for our local economy, where about half of our business buildings on Main Street were sitting vacant and looking a little bit dilapidated. Well, a group of us, some of us that had taken some of that leadership training and a few others, we started thinking, well, how can we do something to fill those businesses? We'd heard about other communities that had arts and culture co-ops, and we thought, well, that'd be a really cool thing for us. We're a little hick redneck town, some arts and culture would be a really good thing. Really good thing. But we were all members of UFA and credit unions and all these co-ops, but we knew diddly squat about how to start and what to do. So, right, the perfect storm still was going on. Right at that point, we learned about 2 awards that were being given out by the Alberta Community and Cooperatives Association. One award to 2 communities in Alberta, and the award was for $50,000 of in-kind support to do a feasibility study and start a co-op. Well, we applied, and we were chosen. Now, one of the new members to our community who really got involved in this community and this volunteering stuff, we asked him to do the application. Here's what he said. I'll just invite you to read that. Kind of grabs you by the heart, eh? So he applied and we were chosen. First thing we did is we hired the best co-op developer in Canada, Mr. Paul Sabai. Yeah, give him a hand. Paul wasn't working with the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association at that point, but he was doing a lot of this co-op development work. And through his generous and his experienced support and help, we spent months doing a feasibility study on this arts and culture co-op. That just wasn't going to work for us. We looked at a tire shop, a bakery, a hardware store, seniors housing. We kicked over a whole bunch of stones and none of them worked for us. And then we learned that this place was for sale. One more click, please. Sangudo Custom Meat Packers, a small abattoir right in this little hamlet of Sangudo. The old guy that was running it, he was about ready to shut the doors and walk away. Well, we didn't want that to happen. We're primarily a livestock-based agricultural community. That would really hurt us. So we thought, what the heck are we going to do? Well, two of our members, the two guys in the picture, Jeff Sanger and Kevin Meyer, they were really keen to own this business and to operate this business, but traditional financing wasn't available to them for a couple of reasons. First thing was experience. Jeff, he's an accountant, although in his words, he makes bacon in his backyard in his underwear. A real foodie, he loves food and meat, and he was keen to get into this business. Sick and tired of his corporate job that took him an hour and a half away from home every day. Kevin is a plumber, had been working in the oil field for many years, but he was sick and tired of traveling as well. And Kevin actually had been trained as a meat cutter many years ago and had worked for a little while in this facility. So they were keen to own it. The other reason that the banks laughed them right out of their doors was that, well, it didn't look like it was a very feasible operation. The old guy that had been running it, he was winding himself down, not working too hard at it anymore, and doing a little bit of left pocket incorporated financing. And so it didn't look very feasible. But we believed in these two guys. They're our friends, they're our neighbors, they're full of energy, they're full of passion. We know that they can do this. So in May of 2010, we incorporated Sangudo Opportunity Development Co-op. We collected a bunch of local capital from 22 members. We bought the real estate, and lent these two guys a little bit of extra money to help them buy the business and the inventory and the equipment. And we worked out a really sweet win-win agreement with them where they pay a monthly lease, which is reasonably easy for them to make in slow times and in startup. Oh well. And then they also give us an agreed upon percentage of their gross sales every quarter. So that means that as a community, the more that we support them and help them and guide them and do whatever we can to have their business grow, the more their quarterly payment is back to our co-op, and then of course the more gets paid back to local investors. A win-win agreement worked really great. About a year after that finished, the Royal Canadian Legion branch in Sangudo decided they were going to sell their building. Their members were aging and dying, and they couldn't keep it open. We didn't want another vacant business building on Main Street. So we collected a bunch more local capital, we bought the real estate, and two of our members, my gorgeous wife Carol on the right, and her partner Jenny, they had already been talking for a number of months about starting a restaurant and a coffee shop, very much needed in our community. So it was perfect time. We collected more capital, we bought the land and building, worked a similar kind of a lease agreement with them, and in December of 2011 they opened Connections Coffee House. It's a restaurant, a coffee shop, a community gathering place, special events that brings in local artisans and musicians, and just to sell local art there on a consignment. It's just a fabulous business and really needed in our community. About a month after that ended, the guys from the meat shop came back to us, and they had applied for and received 2 government grants to do some major expansions and renovations to their plant. But these were cash matching grants from the government. So in 3 weeks, with Christmas right in the middle of it, we collected another bunch of local capital and injected into that business. So in a period of 18 months, in this little dumpy hick town of Sangudo, we collected and injected about $400,000 of local capital to inject into the transition of a business, transition from older entrepreneur to younger entrepreneurs, brand new business, and an expansion of an existing business. Next slide, please. And you say, yeah, so what then? 400,000 bucks, that's not a lot of money. I mean, for some of you, that's pocket change. I mean, these guys are talking millions of dollars and we're talking 400,000. And if you've been to Sangudo, that's about what the rest of the hamlet's worth. Thank you. So here are some fingers and toes calculations of what this does in the bigger community perspective, because that's the really, really important piece. Because of those 3 injections of local capital, it has created about 20 new full and part-time jobs. Most of those people that are working those jobs are under the age of 40. That means we're keeping young folks and we're even attracting young folks to come to our community to work these jobs. Now these folks, while they're in our community, they're buying gas, and tires, and groceries, and meals, and meat, and stamps, and beer. And if they live in our community, they or their kids are going to school, using the walking trails, playing hockey, playing ball, involved in other things that are going on in our community. And these businesses are supporting other farmers and businesses in our community. So there are additionally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every week, additional money that is being circulated through a bunch of businesses in our community. I think that's worth celebrating. And here's why it works. The old expression, the cavalry ain't coming. The government isn't going to come into your community and do it. And an outside developer probably is not going to come into your community and do it. And those rich folks from Calgary are probably not going to come into your community and do it. But you can. Just by working together. Taking your local money and tying it together. Here's some of the benefits. Some really key ones there. That one about aiding in business succession. Right across Canada, we're in a bit of a pickle right now because the baby boomers are starting to retire. The baby boomers are, a lot of them are running these bedrock businesses in your community. We need to find a way to have some younger entrepreneurs take over those businesses. It's a huge, big challenge right now. Another really key one is that it allows people to be active and engaged in their own investments. Because they're taking their own money and investing it in a business right there in their community where they can support and they can encourage their friends and neighbors to support. And if people are invested in, through your co-op, into a business in your community, the chances of them driving to Costco are a little bit minimized compared to what they were before. It can really help, and especially these guys talk about the RRSP benefits. In Alberta, it's not quite as juicy as in Nova Scotia, but these co-ops are eligible for self-directed RRSPs too. So it means that you can redirect that RRSP money that's somewhere else, right back into your own community. I think that's pretty powerful. Now there have been a ton of lessons for us, and in my work with the ACCA and Paul working with other communities across Alberta, some of these lessons are really innovative, some of them are really insightful, and some of them, well, god dang it, they just hurt a whole lot. I'm going to share a few. Communicate, 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 communicate. This is all about leadership and communication. This is really all about that 2%, the people in your community. It's so important to be able to communicate what you're doing within your membership or the group who are investing, but also to the bigger community so that they understand what you're really doing and your intent and the purpose for this. It's really important to keep this idea of community versus investment. Now this is really a weird thing. This is neuro-linguistics programming. But when you go into a community or go to talk to people about community, well, they kind of get excited. And I mean, if you've got a community project going on, people will pull out their checkbooks and they'll write thousands and checks for thousands and thousands of dollars to just give. Because it just feels good and it's for the community and there's no expectation of anything in return. But as soon as you say the word investment, there's a little switch goes click. They think, oh, return on investment, how much is it going to be? What's my cost to get into this? What's my exit strategy? How much are you going to give me? What's in it for me? It's weird, but it happens. So I think that the more that we can keep this idea of the bigger community, when we're talking about these, when we're promoting these in your community, the better off, the easier it can be to sell. Non-disclosure document, when you get a group together and you're starting to look at something in your community to do this, it's a really good idea to have everybody sign a non-disclosure agreement where at least it's a level of conscious awareness that what is talked about in the meeting stays there. We almost lost our first deal because talk got spread around the community and some other people tried to get our deal away from us. In several other communities we've worked with, similar kinds of things have happened where a project that the group was really looking for kind of got scooped and then just did nothing. So it's important to make sure that stuff stays in the meeting with the people there. You don't want coffee shops spreading around, which also is part of the next one, vulnerability of the entrepreneur. If, for example, us as a co-op, if we're investing in these entrepreneurs, they're really pulling down their pants. We're looking at their business plans. We're helping them with our business plans. They're sharing their finances with us, with their friends and neighbors and family. That can be a bit of a vulnerable position, so there has to be a huge level of trust. But it's totally possible, and it makes it even more powerful. It's really important when you're dealing with getting members, getting people to invest. They're not just money. These are people that you know, that you like, that you trust. People that you would be comfortable give them your checkbook, just as they're comfortable to give you theirs. Next slide, please. Oh, communicate. Interesting. Flexibility, the beauty of this whole model is that it can be used for anything in your community. Now these are for-profit co-ops, but it can be used for anything. And the idea of, when you're dealing with your entrepreneurs, although you're providing financing, but you can make deals and work out agreements, lease agreements that no bank could ever touch because you're dealing with people that you know and like and trust. And it's really important if you're working like we did with a lease agreement in our first couple deals, that it allows the entrepreneur to be innovative and to be motivated and to really grow rather than to hamper them. Our first deal, we realized that it was holding our entrepreneurs back, so we made an amendment to change that so that then the more that they could grow, the better they could do. It supported them as well. And it's really important to know that the entrepreneurs got skin in the game. When you collect a bunch of this local money, you're not just trying to give it to somebody to start some business to keep it alive. Gosh, no. You want to make sure that they're really keen on this. They got money involved. In our second deal, my wife's partner, Jenny, she had nothing but a little bit of sweat equity into the restaurant. And after about 3 months, when she wasn't able to pull out a great big healthy paycheck, she decided it was time to bail out. It put kind of a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, so you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure you got skin in the game and good agreements. Next slide, please. Oh, communicate. Funny how that keeps slipping in there. That is so important. Due diligence. Because you are acting kind of like a bank, you're a financing institution, it's really important to do that due diligence to make sure that the business plan works, that it's feasible, that everybody feels comfortable with the deal. And as Peter said, or Chris, I'm not sure which one, allow for contingencies. These things take longer than you expect. It costs more than you expect. Make sure that you got those contingencies in there. Next one, please. Doggone communication. My kids must have built this for me. This is long-term investment. This is friendly, patient capital in your community. This is not something that you buy, and these shares are not something you buy and sell on the phone or on the internet. This is a minimum of 5 years. When people are putting their money in, that it's going to be that long before they before they can ask to take their money back out. They'll be getting return on investments and dividends in that time, but to actually take the money out, you need a long-term view. And that's, again, relates to coming back to revisiting that vision for your community. What are you trying to do here? The community benefit. And if you hate meetings, well, you better not get into one of these. It's going to take lots of meetings. But the more you can build the trust and community ownership, that is the game changer. Next slide. Oh yeah, there's that communication again. We don't want anybody falling on the floor. Next slide. And this is probably the most important piece. when it comes to that 2% magic, the people part, lots of shuns. Appreciation, validation, celebration. You know, it's so important at every meeting and when you're walking down the street talking about things, you're appreciating people, noticing the resources that you've got, acknowledging those things, and it just makes such a huge difference when you can have some real celebration. And the next slide. So I'm going to just shut up and open the floor up to some questions, comments, anything that you've got.
What was the most effective strategy for getting more people on board with your vision?
It's something I'm going to mention a little bit tonight too. Are you going to be here tonight? It's about getting people in alignment. It's building trust and getting people in alignment. There are people in your community that just don't like new ideas. But if we really take the time to visit with people and ask them what they care about, what's important to them in their community, what would they like to see? There are always some ways small little ways that you can get people going in alignment with your vision. Some are opposed, some are going the other way, but there's always a way to build that trust and pull them around. And those people can become your greatest supporters when they've had that opportunity to be heard and to be valued and appreciated for what they think as well. No doubt there's going to be some that are absolutely going kicking and screaming the other way, but oh well, those probably aren't the people that are going to invest in it. Anything else?
Yeah, from more of a political perspective, some of the things that happen in our small communities is because government has chosen to shut that down or not provide that service, maybe healthcare or whatever. Have you come across them and have you dealt with that? I mean, your school was a good example. You never did tell us what happened there.
Eventually, our high school did close. It took about 4 years before they did it. And though that is an organization that we just have, how can I put this nicely? They are not very supportive of our community. And now I can say that it was the very best thing for our community that they threatened to close our school back then, because then it got us into gear. However, they've been a real burn, our saddle blanket, and I think it appears that they're trying to wind right down in our small community. However, we're seeing that as an opportunity to maybe take over their building and start some kind of a charter school or something like that. And we've got a lot of parents who've been sort of talking a little bit under the radar about these sorts of things the last few years, and I think that could be something that'll happen. Yeah, healthcare, same thing. You know, some of these systems, I don't poke too many buttons here, some of these systems are broken. And this is a way for a community to take charge of these systems and take charge of your own community and do something about it. Yeah. Did that answer
Yes,
a little bit?
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Anything else before the master?
How's the butcher doing?
Big pardon?
How's the butcher doing? How's the
Butcher shop is doing really, really well. We've just gone through a refinancing. Their initial deal was 3 years, which was too short. That's why I say you want to make sure the deal is at least 5. It was too short for them to really get the business under themselves, and we've just gone through a refinancing of them. We rolled both the initial part and then the second loan we made with them into one big loan, where now our co-op holds mortgage on it. And with them, it assures them of a flat monthly payment as well. And they're really coming together now. The business has grown exponentially, and they're still custom cutting business, where farmers bring in their animals, anything but poultry, and get it processed there. However, they're doing a lot more business where they're selling beef to some of the top restaurants in Edmonton, and it's going really, really well for them. Plus, they're able to buy most of their animals that they buy come right locally.
Sangudo has a small population. What is the current community buy-in percentage-wise? Where did you start with and where are you today?
We are now at 29 members, so it's a small group. It's a tough sell. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, it's a tough sell. And yet new projects are exciting. This last one that we did, where it was still the same old project that's around, people have seen it for 3 years, it was really tough to make that one work. But we just had a meeting a week ago, and we're going to be purchasing some land in our community, right in the hamlet, and building some houses because we need some good housing. And we figure these 3 lots are adjacent, and they're in a nice area of town. We figure that will improve the value of land in all of the community. And then we're looking at buying other lots where the houses are dilapidated, getting them out of there, and building some new homes there as well. And there's a lot of excitement for that. And I think the checkbook will come out.
Can I just follow up with that? With the 29, is that in part because of how it's structured in terms of the allowance around creating this type of a paradigm? Is there a limit of the number of people that can participate?
Okay, yeah, that's a Securities Commission piece. And the way our co-op is set out, our initial projects were done with member loans, which meant that no member could invest more than $10,000 in the first year. And so that was a bit of a limiting factor for us. Now we've converted now to where we're using investment shares, or what I call community shares, where there's no, as long as we keep 50 or less members, there's no upper limit on how much any one person can invest. Yeah. Is that helpful?
And what's the average amount that people invest? Or is there?
You know, the average amount between the lowest we had was $1,500 in one project, and the highest we've got at this point is $48,000. However, most of them are ranging between about 10 and 20. And I really believe that we could probably tap into, if we've got exciting projects, we could probably tap into $10,000 every year from people.
Does that money all come from individuals, or are there businesses and organizations that are contributing?
No, this is all from individuals. However, the co-op is laid out, the bylaws or the articles of incorporation are such that companies could buy in as well. Yeah.
And you should just tell people that there's only 380 people in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Well, 29 investors, it's almost 8%.
However, the sort of the catchment area is probably maybe 1,500, maybe 2,000 at the most. It's small, and that's a really neat concept too, is that although the hamlet is 380 people, we don't have one member that lives in our hamlet. They're all local area. So here's another thing. When we think about hamlet beautification and all these other things that we do on an annual basis, there would be less than 1% of the people that come out to those daily events that live in our hamlet. Everybody is the rural people, which is weird. And it sure ticks off some of one of our councilors who lives in town. Another question?
What is the government? Is it made fire? Is it a regional district?
That's a really good point. It's a hamlet now, so it's under the jurisdiction of the county. And it was a town, or a village, pardon me, till about 7-8 years ago. And we couldn't do anything in our community. We were always hampered by small thinking town councilors, to be quite honest. And once it dissolved and it became the county, and the county main office building is in the hamlet of Sangudo as well, it has really helped. We've got and that's a really key lesson, was to do a really good job of communicating and building a strong rapport and trust with our county. So they know who we are, they know what we're doing, they're very supportive with this land deal now. You know, they're incredibly supportive of that. They're willing to give us an incredible price on this land and willing to support us in whatever way they can. Because they see it's increasing their tax base. It's helping to keep the community alive.
And the more regional.
The county is more regional. Yeah, it includes, it's a fairly large area. Yeah. We're right, the hamlet of Sangudo sits right basically in the center of the county. Anything else? Ooh, I got away lucky. One more slide. So here's my closing for you. What are you going to do now? You've already done it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dan.